Well, I'm really glad that you're here today. And before we dive into this incredible moment in the story of Jesus that will absolutely and certainly intersect with our lives, I just want to remind you that you stepped into something today that is both miraculous and unusual when you decided to come to church here. As you might know, PCC is a multi-site church, which means that there are multiple campuses having church today in locations that at their farthest points are like 100 miles and nearly a 2-hour drive apart from each other. The communities that we serve look different. The buildings where we meet look different. The context and the flavor of each campus looks different, but in the most important of ways, we are the same. Because today, right now, you are a part of a movement that is reaching more people than we have ever reached before. Every single physical campus is growing. At our Riverside campus in Bremo Bluff, on the outskirts of Fork Union, at our Farmville campus, currently on the outskirts of town there, at our Midlothian campus, which is surrounded by development that just is popping up everywhere, at our Alet campus, which is overflowing with potential, and at our Powhatan campus, our largest campus where it all began. What's happening at PCC makes this experience both, like I said a minute ago, it's both miraculous and it is unusual. It's miraculous because God is the one that is clearly doing it. We actually really believe that the good things that we do here at our church, and there are lots of them, are not things that we are actually doing or we're making happen. If you ever see somebody around here sort of swell up and poke their chest out and strut their stuff like we're all that, you ought to politely and respectfully call them out. And I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's me or your campus pastor or your worship leader or who it is. We all know. We all should know. We all do know that whoever I am, does not deserve the credit. It's God who did it. It's God who's doing it, and we're just the vehicle. And because God's the one doing it, by definition, when God does something, it's something only God can do, and that's what we call a miracle. Every campus has been the target of some kind of naysayer in the past, and really it continues to happen. From our very first day, I'm the founding pastor, so I ought to know, for all the way from our very beginnings, people have sort of, taken shots at us and wanted us to fail and all that. And it was God who was always doing the work. It was always God's vision. It was always God's producing of life change. And as my mama would always say, the proof was in the pudding, is in the pudding. Lives really are being changed here. You don't have to look far to talk to somebody who can tell you about it in themselves. So lives have been changed in the past, they're happening, life change is happening now, and none of us is capable of that. Only God can produce real life change. You and I, we just get to be a part of it. So that's the miraculous part, that God is doing it. It's unusual, and I'm not happy to tell you this, but it's unusual because most churches are in decline. Tom Rainer, who's a follower of Jesus and sort of a student of church trends, we pay attention to him. He says that in this year alone, in 2025, 15,000 churches in the United States will close their doors forever. Fewer Americans are a part of church, although I would argue that most people are still open to life with God. They're just not looking to the church for answers. And so because of that, the church is quickly waning in its influence. And the question is, how do we turn the tide? How does the church regain its position of influence, and why does that even matter? Who really cares? Today's Out of the Ordinary story, that's the series we've been in, Out of the Ordinary, we're going to look at something that will get to the heart of these questions, and we're going to get there in just a second. But first, we need to understand, why do people come to church in the first place? And then we can make this critical turn that we've all got to make in order for everybody who encounters Jesus at some point, in order for us to stay excited and stay connected and stay engaged with what God is doing here. So this is going to be all illustrated in the Out of the Ordinary story we're going to look at in just a few minutes from the Bible. But we've got to see this first. We all come to God initially as a consumer. That's true for everybody here today. We all come to God initially as a consumer. And the question we're asking in some form is, what can God do for me? That's our starting point. And it's a good question, and it's the right question. And many of us here today, in our church right now, you're on a journey towards God, and that's the question you're asking. Can God make my life better? Can God help me to become a better person? Can he help me overcome my internal demons? Help me overcome my past? Bring me joy? Help me experience peace? Fix my problem? All of those are sort of under the umbrella of what can God do for me? And it's where everybody starts, and it's good. There's nothing at all wrong with it. But God never leaves us there. He never answers that question and then just leaves us there. Because at the end of the day, God can and will do for you what you cannot do for you, and then he'll make it not about you. God can and will do for you what you cannot do for you, and then he'll make it not about you. Or in other words, it was always God's plan to help you and then to send you to help other people like you. That was always the deal. This right here, this is why our church is thriving. Because thousands of people received the blessing of God and then understood that we have to then deploy that blessing so that everyone around us has an opportunity to experience that blessing too. And that brings us to our out of the ordinary encounter with Jesus today. It's the account of these guys who believed in this principle right here so much that they went to extraordinary, controversial, and costly lengths to live it out. They did something that was sort of over the top out of the ordinary, and I think it's going to inspire our willingness to do the same thing. Mark, one of the earliest followers of Jesus, he tells us about it like this. A few days later, Jesus again entered Capernaum, and the people heard that he had come home. And they gathered in such large numbers that there was no room left, not even outside the door, and he preached the word to them. So Jesus has been traveling around the region of Galilee, particularly moving around the Sea of Galilee. And in the Sea of Galilee is really not very big. It's more like a big lake than an ocean. And so we started the series around the Sea of Galilee, looking at the out of the ordinary experience of Jesus walking on the Sea of Galilee. And then the second week in the series, Pastor Angie taught us about how Jesus went to the southeast side of the Sea of Galilee to a place where there weren't a whole lot of Jewish people, and that was a different kind of out of the ordinary experience. And then Ellis Hobson last week took us on an out of the ordinary encounter on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. In fact, there's an entire conversation that we could have that would be pretty potent about the symbolism of Jesus traveling around and his interaction with this body of water, but that would be a conversation for another day. In this case, Jesus has been moving around the sea, particularly, Mark reminds us that he's been moving around this town called Capernaum. It's very near the top of the Sea of Galilee, the northern part. It's on the water, and it's the sort of ground zero for Jewish territory. So there's mostly Jewish people here. So in this short time, Mark tells us that Jesus has been bouncing around these different places, and he's been teaching people, and he's been healing lots of people. Word gets out about that. He's been driving out demons. And so by the time he gets back to Capernaum, he's famous, like uber famous. And his fame attracts everybody around. Everybody wants to come and see Jesus. So on this particular day, Mark says Jesus goes into this house and he starts teaching. And a crowd quickly starts to form because he's Jesus. And it grows from this small, intimate group of people, becomes a crowd, becomes a mob, becomes a horde. And it grows wider by the second until the house is completely full, like it's standing room only. And then people flow into the doorways, and then it spills out into the whole area in front of the house, and then it's in the lawn, and then it's in the neighbor's lawn until there are people everywhere as far as you can see. Shoulder to shoulder, crammed together, everybody breathing as one, just trying to get a peek, straining to get to see Jesus. If you were lucky enough to get there early, you might catch a glimpse of him. But those people far from the door, they can't see Jesus. They can't hear Jesus. They don't even know that Jesus is actually in there. Somebody told them Jesus was in there. That's it. And remember, this is AD 30. So, put yourself in the time frame. There are no video monitors. There's no overflow room. There's no sound system. There's no, we're running a little bit late. Let's just go to the next service. There's no online option. So the obvious question is, why would these people hang around? I mean, they can't see him. They can't hear him. Why would they stay? As I mentioned earlier, we all begin our encounter with Jesus as a consumer. Our initial step towards God is always founded in some version of, what can God do for me? Well, Jesus' fame was based on his compassion, particularly his willingness to heal people and his willingness to embrace people others considered untouchable, and talking with outcasts and breathing life into the lifelessness of others. And so these people are there, even though they can't see Jesus and even though they can't hear Jesus, because they're thinking sooner or later, maybe I'll get to make my way up to the door. Sooner or later, maybe Jesus will come out. He's got to come out sometime. And regardless of how small the odds are, there's at least a slim chance that maybe I can touch his robe, or maybe we'll make eye contact, or maybe, just maybe, he'll be willing to have a conversation with me. So that's one question, like, why would these people hang out? But the second question is, why did Jesus stay in the house? I mean, he knows there are people outside. Why not go out there where more people can benefit from his teaching? He could position himself so that everybody could hear him. Well, we don't know for sure, we're not told. But my bet is that Jesus knew what was about to happen. And he wanted to teach a lesson about what it really means to go to out of the ordinary lengths on behalf of people around you who need to get in front of Jesus. Maybe he's hoping that you and I will get the point too. Watch this. Some men came, bringing to Jesus a paralyzed man carried by 4 of them. I think this is important and interesting. There are more than 4 with this guy, the guy that's paralyzed. Some people came, 4 of them carried the guy. So there were more than 4. We don't know how many. Maybe there's 6, maybe there's 8, maybe there's 20, but there's more than 4. And they probably, and they personally carried this guy. This is some kind of an intimacy. So they knew this man well. He was a friend. They loved him. He wasn't just some charity case. He wasn't just somebody they felt sorry for. They deeply cared about him. They personally carried him. We don't know how long they walked. And just to remind you of something, if you've been around, you've heard me say many times, a parable is a fictitious story that reveals a spiritual truth. This is not a parable. This is a story that actually happened. So here's this real guy. He's paralyzed, presumably from the neck down, because he came lying flat on some kind of first century version of a gurney instead of being carried in a chair. So he's lying flat on a mat. And they carried him for how long, we don't know, and they get all the way to the house. And if you do it like me, I just would encourage you, when I read the scriptures, particularly when I read a story like this, I try to immerse myself in it. I want to see it. I want to feel it. I want to know I want to do the best I can to live into the story for a minute. So I think as they're carrying this guy from wherever they're coming, as they're carrying him, I think they're talking to him about what would happen when they get to Jesus. Jerry, man, I know you've been sick for a long time. And I know, man, you've tried a lot of things and you've had a lot of high hopes and then deep disappointments because none of it ever worked. Everything you've tried has failed. But hey, Jerry, today is your day. This is your chance because the healer has come. We've heard all about him and we're going to get you in front of him and your life is going to change, Jerry. Hang on, just hang in there. We're almost there. These guys had heard about Jesus. We're not told how, but we know everybody had heard about Jesus. What we do know, though, is that they were sold out. They were convinced that Jesus was the answer for their friend. He was the life change agent. He was the catalyst for course correction and new direction and a future that's filled with hope and filled with promise. They knew that for their friend, and they were determined and they were excited, but they weren't alone. There were thousands of other people that day in the same place who felt the exact same way. And they weren't all carrying a paralyzed friend. They just all wanted to get near Jesus because they all wanted something from Jesus. Because that's how we all come to Jesus at first, except for the guys carrying the mat. We'll get to them in just a second. So these guys are carrying their friend. And, I don't know how far, but at some point they can see the house where Jesus is, and they see the crowd. And as they approach the house, they realize this is a wall of people. The same crowd that kept almost everybody else out would keep them out too. I mean, think about it like this. If uninhibited, healthy, agile people can't squeeze their way through this sea of bodies, there's no chance that a foursome carrying a paralytic could. Must have been terribly disappointing. I mean, I think most people would quit. I would probably quit. Most people would probably give up. And they might ask a few people, hey, could you let us through? And maybe a few people would, but the effort was futile. And there was no way they were ever going to get to the front of the line, much less into the house. So their short-lived mission, it was a nice thought, noble, honorable, but it was over. Most people would just throw up their hands and say, hey, Jerry, man, we tried, man, I'm so sorry. But we're just not going to be able to make it. Let's just go home. Most people would do that, but not these four guys. There was an out-of-the-ordinary belief inside of them that led to this incredible out-of-ordinary action. They knew somehow that they were on a divine mission, and they were undeterred by the crowd. They were just determined somehow, some way, as creative as they had to be, to get their friend face to face with the one person that they knew could change his life. They had to get him in front of Jesus. They believed in their mission so much that they did something incredibly audacious, something we only read about one time in the entire Bible. Since they could not get him to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus by digging through it. Remember, this is like a thatch roof. Still, it's got structure to it. And then they lowered the mat the man was lying on. So there Jesus is. I want you to see this with me. And he's preaching. Now, we don't know what the title of the sermon was, but he's Jesus. And we've got some sermons of his in the Bible. So I don't know what he was talking about, but it's probably like heaven, God, the kingdom of God, how to change your life. And he's telling people not just to change their lives, but he's giving them the power and the tools to experience life like never before. And he's excited, and they're excited. And I imagine he's getting to that stirring part of his message. You know, the part where he walks down to the second level of the platform? It's like the climax of the sermon. And it's right at the place, like he's at that moment where some musician starts playing. And the moment is being made, and he's getting worked up. And you can see people responding, and Jesus is looking right at them, and they're nodding their heads, and a few people are crying. Maybe somebody's got their hand raised in the air, and I'm with him, right? And I get that. As a communicator, it's right in that moment when you're driving the point home, and you know the thing is working, and people are getting it, and you can see it's connecting. And I think it's right in the middle of that moment when all of a sudden, and the sheetrock starts falling, and the rafters give way, and light from the outside starts pouring into the dark living room. Now, I'm not Jesus, but as a communicator who stands in front of a lot of people frequently, I've had a few interruptions in my career. Like I can think of, I think this might have happened 3 times. I know for sure it happened twice, where I was right in the middle of a message, and the power went out like completely, like shut down. Like I don't know if this is like divine, but it was almost like God saying, hey, bro, this ain't working. Turn it off, pray and send them home, bro. Try again next week. I don't know. One time there was this special needs adult who came to our church from this group home. They would bring, it was like 4 people who lived in this home, and they would bring them every week to church for a while. And one guy was a runner. And yeah. And so he gets here, he's a runner, and somehow he gets loose. And so I'm in the middle of my message with these adults from this group home, and all of them are here, and this runner's in the room, and they get loose. And I don't know it. So the people in the room are, I'm working it, and I think, this message is connecting. And what I didn't know is the guy gets away from his caregiver, and he finds his way to the back of the platform. We were in the high school back then, and I'm looking this way, and he's back there running from side to side over the stage, like right there. And I can't see, I don't know, man. And I realized, no one is paying attention. It's like they're being hypnotized. They're watching it like this. He's going back and forth, back and forth. And I could almost hear people say, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I can almost hear people say, who had invited their friends to church, hey, man, sometimes Brian does these things and they seem like they don't make any sense, but he's going to tie it all together in just a minute. Except the runner wasn't a part of the message. He was just running. An escapee evading capture through my entire Easter message. Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you. It was Easter Sunday. A few years ago, I can't remember the topic, and I don't remember the text I was teaching on or whatever, but my message must not have been very good at all, because I'm making my closing statement, the final point that I felt like God had really laid on my heart, and I thought it was working. I thought we were connecting. I was feeling it. Music was going, and the lights kind of came down, and we were lining our hearts up together with God. It was a powerful moment for me. But to my right over here, somewhere on the front row, some guy sitting up here in this very crowded room in front of hundreds of people, while I'm in the middle of this statement, he goes, oh. Just like that. We don't single anybody out, but I couldn't help myself. I was like, really, bro? I guess every message is not a home run. Jesus, of course, is not interrupted because his message was boring. And I got a little rattled that day, but I suspect that Jesus knew exactly what was going on, and I think he remained steady. He's Jesus after all. But I do imagine that everybody else in the room panics. They're not outside. They can't see what's happening. And all of a sudden, the roof starts caving in. They got to think, is this an earthquake? Is this the end? Jesus talked about the end sometimes. No. It's just 4 crazy guys and a friend that they're desperate for. Sort of like a first century Mission Impossible. They size up the house. They're outside. They can't get through the crowd. They check out the house. They make a plan, send some dispatchers. They climb up on the roof. They surgically remove this thatch section, and they lower their friend through the hole so that he's directly in front of Jesus. And when I think of the story, when I try to live in it, I think, well, surely the house goes silent. People on the lawn, they're watching this. They can see what's happening. People in the house now realize what's happening. And everybody waits for Jesus to do what any right-minded, clear-thinking church leader would do in this moment. He would look at them and say, you deconstructed the house. You interrupted the service. You disrupted my moment. I'm in here precisely so that we can have orderly church. Who do you think you are taking this place apart? Wait your turn. Stand in line like everyone else. But Jesus doesn't do that. He doesn't throw them out. He doesn't reprimand them. And he doesn't ignore it and just pretend it's not happening. I think that Jesus is a bit taken aback, but not in a mad kind of way. I think he's deeply proud. And I think he's hoping that the rest of the gawking followers grasp the lesson. These guys aren't crazy. They're not trying to be rude. They're not insensitive to other people who've been there for longer than they have. They're not really trying to cut in line. They just have a determined mission. and they are willing to go to extraordinary lengths to accomplish it. They're committed at any cost to get their friend face to face with the one person that they knew could change his life. They had to get him in front of Jesus. And they were obsessed with making that encounter happen. We can guess what comes next, right? We don't need the scripture. I mean, Jesus heals people. That's what he does, left and right. People bring him the sick. He takes care of them. If they bring him a demon-possessed person, he casts the demons out. Never does Jesus lack compassion for somebody who's in front of him, who's in need, which is why what makes what happens next even more surprising than what has already happened. When Jesus saw their faith, he's looking at the guys on the roof. When he saw their faith, he said to the paralyzed man, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Come again? Jesus looks at the man on the mat. He looks up at the friends on the roof, looks back down at the man on the mat, reaches out his miracle-working hands, and forgives the guy. More surprisingly, he points to the faith of the friends as his forgiveness rationale. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the shock on the faces of the friends or the face of the guy on the man on the mat? And I wonder, I just imagine that there's got to be some kind of protest or argument or pleading of their case. They might have been speechless, but I don't know. They went out of their way to get their friend here. So surely somebody said something like, "Gosh, Jesus, we really appreciate the forgiveness and all. And we don't mean to sound ungrateful. In fact, it's very generous, but he is paralyzed. And we were hoping that you could, I don't know, make him walk." Truthfully, we don't know the reaction of the man on the mat or the friends on the roof. We're not told that. We're just left to guess. But we do know the reaction of some other people who were there that day watching it all happen. Some teachers of the law, these are like Pharisees, they're kind of the people trying to take Jesus down, were sitting there thinking to themselves, "Why does this fellow talk like that? He's blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone?" Immediately, Jesus knew in his spirit what they were thinking in their hearts. And so he said to them, "Why are you thinking these things? Which is easier, to say to this paralyzed man, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up, take your mat, and walk'? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." So he said to the man, "I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home." So he got up, took his mat, and walked out in full view of them all. This amazed everyone, and they praised God, saying, "We have never seen anything like this." Jesus saw the audacious action, not of the one who needed his help on the mat, but of the ones who cared about him so much, the guys on the roof. Now, there were other times, lots of other times in the Bible when Jesus healed people because of their own faith. But this time, it's the boldness of the friends that proves to be the critical factor. They're the ones that got the guy in front of Jesus in the first place. So why were they so motivated? Why were they so determined? Because they believed to their core, even when their friend would have doubted, that Jesus was the only answer to his life. It's interesting to me that they didn't wait for the timing to be better. Tearing the roof apart was not just demolition, it was that, but they were also going to have to come back and fix it. Instead of being in the field or working or with their families, they would have to repair the house. It wasn't their house. They made this huge sacrifice. They carried this man all this distance. They risked their safety, their reputation, tear the roof apart, materials and time to put it all back together again. Why not wait for a more convenient moment? Because they didn't know, like you and I don't know, what the future holds. We don't know what's going to happen later today or tomorrow. What they knew was that Jesus was present right now. And they could clearly see that God was at work right then and right there. So for them, waiting wasn't an option. This was urgent. The moment had come. And they would not be hindered or deterred from their mission to get the one who needed Jesus in front of Jesus. And this is the best part. In their quest to solve the physical need of their friend, his paralysis, Jesus healed the deeper need of his soul, the forgiveness of his sins, the charting of a new course for his whole life. And you and I have to care about that too. When the four friends climbed the roof that day, they knew that their actions would be unconventional. They knew they would be the target of some criticism. Tearing up somebody's house is going to have a cost. But it is nothing compared to the blessing of watching someone get a whole new life. You and I, we come to Jesus because of what Jesus can do for you, what Jesus can do for me. But then you realize that the greater blessing is about helping other people experience that too. And that is our story. From our very first day as a church, literally from our very first day, we decided that we would be obsessed with helping every person in every community, around every place that we would go, and every prison we would encounter, and every mission partner around the world, that we would be obsessed with helping people experience the unimaginable life change that an encounter with Jesus can offer. We believe that to our core. We know how God can change a person because he did that with us. We know how God can alter the future and transform your heart and heal the deep wounds of your past and give you a sense of purpose and peace and joy that is profound and life-changing. We know all of that because it happened with us. And we know, having received the blessing of being around Jesus, that everyone around us needs to be around Jesus too. That's why our church is the way that it is. In case you don't know, everything we do is intentional. It's why our rooms are a little bit darker. It's why we have lots of aisle seats. We have darker rooms so that people can be anonymous, and aisle seats so that you can leave in a hurry if it gets weird. Because that's what people who are checking out church think. If this gets crazy, how am I out? They're all looking for an exit plan. We want to make sure they know that you can go, it's okay. We do things that are a little bit out of the ordinary sometimes, just to shake things up. We want people to be able to encounter God at their pace. You can explore what the rest of us have experienced without ever being singled out or judged, or we're not going to talk over your head. And what's our part? Well, first, our part is living a consistent life that is focused on Jesus in every place that we go, in every hat that we wear. No duplicitous living. If you're one person in one setting and a different person in another setting, that just messes the whole thing up. I want to be a consistent follower of Jesus in every moment, in every arena, in every day. And then we have to be prepared to share the story of what God has done for us. Because if you live consistently a different life, people are going to look at you and say, what is it about you? Sooner or later, they're going to say, what is it about you? We have to be prepared to share the story of what God has done for us and invite our friends to church to hear about and encounter the truth about Jesus. I've got a friend I've known for a long, long time. He was an addict, and he struggled with depression and 1,000 bad choices. And I just kept I would just stay in touch with him. I would just say, hey, man, I just want you to know I love you. I care about you. I never offered any unsolicited advice about how he lived his life. I never offered anything that would be perceived as judgment of any kind. I just kept reminding him, hey man, God's got a plan for you. It's a good plan. It's a plan for your life to experience all kinds of amazing things. And finally, one day, he made his way to church, and he kept coming back, and he experienced Jesus' transformation inside of him. It was amazing. He's a completely different person. He came because of what God could do for him. But he didn't stop there. He started inviting his friends who he used to get high with. And some of those friends said, you know, man, I want what you got. I want to experience the change that I see in you. And they started coming to church too. They experienced transformation, got a whole new life. They started inviting their friends, multiple generations of friends. All of this happened because it was always God's plan to help you and then to send you to help other people like you. I wanted you to see this. I know I talk about it some, you hear my words, but I wanted you to see it in a personal way that God is working through a friend of mine named Tony Stoddard and a new friend named Jared. Take a look.
Hi, I'm Jared Coder.
And I'm Tony Stoddard.
And I'm here to tell you today how I met Tony Stoddard. In my pursuit of music, I came down to Virginia, and I found out about a store on the Anderson Highway called Powhatan Music. And I went in and I asked if I could be taught how to play the bass more appropriately than I had been playing it.
My store manager told me one day that a guy came in looking for bass lessons.
Yeah, Tony, realizing my absence of proper nutrition, said we probably ought to eat before we start playing music, and evidenced likely by my play style and inability to play very well on an empty stomach, he conditioned me and taught me that the place to eat breakfast was no other than the county seat.
Absolutely, and Saturday mornings, breakfast buffet at that.
I think the introduction to faith by Tony was when we were sitting at the breakfast table and he said, should we say grace? And it was like, that probably the first time I'd ever done that. And it was like, so Tony's introduction to faith to me was, hey, let's have this breakfast. And I say, pause. And I had a moment of pause. I said, all right. I bowed my head and I listened. I was like, oh, all right. So that's that. It's that first introduction, that first step. And that was very early. I don't know if you recall that. At least it resonates in my mind, because I was like, oh, so that's what we've all said grace or a version of it at some dinner, someplace in our life. But I think that was the first time it hit me, because it was so personal, I guess you could say, to some extent.
So after perhaps a period of 6 to 8 months or so, Jared was demonstrating some proficiency and consistent being able to get around on the instrument. And it's in the back of my mind that I think I could possibly encourage him to become further involved in his faith and through worship music, and an opportunity to play at PCC if that came around. And so at one point it did. I don't quite remember the circumstance. We may have needed a bass player because someone had to cancel at the last minute. But in any event, I asked him if he would be inclined to play for a Sunday, and encouraged him that I would help him work through the music so that he was as prepared as possible. And so he agreed, and that was the start of playing at PCC.
It was pretty incredible. Probably top 5 things in my lifetime that I've ever been asked to do, pursued doing, and those don't go lightly. It's everything from marriage to joining the military to certain things that I've committed my heart and my soul and my mind to. And boy, it's been incredible. It's been amazing, to say the least. And I found that getting the word through the music has been the part that has touched my soul the deepest, in the way that I don't think reading it would have been.
He's a very accomplished guy in many areas. And now he's adding musician to that, because simply through his willingness to commit to this project, he's also becoming a great servant for the church and for God. So
I hope to continue with that.
It's a real blessing.
So part of this whole journey too was learning that it isn't just about your path and how you pursue it, but it's introducing it to other people. I think, like Tony did for me, was they may not be musically inclined. I've taken my neighbors, I've taken people that I go to work with, anybody who expresses an interest or even makes a comment about, well, I haven't been, or I don't know, or the place that I used to go or something. To me, those are all introductions or opportunities to bring them into something that means so much to me. If you would bring somebody to your favorite restaurant, or even introduce them to music that you, hey, try this CD, just listen to it on your way home from work. I don't see PCC as any different from that. I don't always know if they're going to stay or if it's going to be the place where they find their home. But if they can get something out of it like I have and experience what that is, and that's been really great, because then you have a great conversation about it after. I noticed that some people are constant in their faith, some people have fallen away, and some folks are falling towards. If at any point I can be the reassurance of them going, or at least getting them back to start or finding them a place, I think PCC has been that place for me to accept, embrace, or bring in people who aren't traditional. I don't know what a traditional, servant would be, but for me, it's been, that embrace. Everybody's been encouraging and supportive and great. PCC is a great place to come. If you can't find a home here, you're not looking for faith. To me, it's that simple.
Guys like Jared are kind of my favorite people because they're having this eye-opening experience, and the whole idea of Jesus and the whole idea of encountering Jesus and living life with Jesus is alive and fresh. And it reminds me that this never gets old. Both life with Jesus and helping people come to know him, it never gets old. I want you to notice that Tony met Jared where Jared was. Tony didn't ask Jared to conform. In fact, he went out of his way to help him, like four guys carrying a mat. And then Tony started looking for ways to influence his new friend, both musically, because that's what Jared wanted, and spiritually, because that's what Jared needed. And it was never forced. And along the way, they started to trust each other, and that led to deeper conversations, and that led to transformation. Today, Jared is living a whole new life, a brand new life that is transforming him because of Jesus, because someone was willing, because someone recognized that it was always God's plan to help you and then to send you to help other people like you. Here's the truth, church. God can take any one of us and use us to help people like us. That was always his plan. And we began this conversation today with the declaration that all the good things that happen are because of who God is, not because of who I am, not because of who you are. And that's the thing. That's the out of the ordinary, remarkable, almost unbelievable thing, that God would use me in all my messed upness and all my brokenness, and then he would deploy me. That God would take a group of nobodies, and along the way, one person at a time, maybe we can just maybe reach everybody with the life-changing truth about Jesus.
And why you ever chose me has always been a mystery. All my life I've been told I belong at the end of the line, with all the other not quite's, with all the never get it right. But it turns out they're the ones you were looking for all this time. And I'm just a nobody, trying to tell everybody all about somebody who saved my soul. Ever since you rescued me, you gave my heart a song to sing. I'm living for the world to see nobody but Jesus. I'm living for the world to see nobody but Jesus. Moses had stage fright, David brought a rock to a sword fight. You picked 12 outsiders nobody would have chosen. You changed the world. Well, the moral of the story is everybody got a purpose. So when I hear that devil start talking to me, saying, who do you think you are? Say, I'm just a nobody, trying to tell everybody all about somebody who saved my soul. Ever since you rescued me, you gave my heart a song to sing, for the world for the world to see. Nobody but Jesus. I'm living for the world to see. Nobody but Jesus. I'm living for the world to see. Nobody but Jesus.
I want to tell everyone that I can the story of how God changed my life. Not because it's about me, but so that they'll see Jesus through me. And you can do that too. And when you do, you'll be bringing people to Jesus the same way the paralyzed man's friends did. We can bring those around us to Jesus one person at a time, and we can change the world when we do. I hope you'll do that this week, and I hope you'll come back as we kick off a new series next week. Invite a friend to watch with you, and we'll see you then.